Hi, today is April 5th, 2023, and here are my poems for the day. The first one is poem number 569 for the year, The Townhouses. They looked like a lovely little, happy little row of townhouses, and they were quite lovely, but there was quite a lot of drama among them. Lenny, on the far left, felt inferior due to his size and his position at the far end, and his sense that Patrick, who was on his left, was much better looking and more stately and more reserved and civilized and far superior to him. And although Patrick would never say so, he did feel superior to Lenny. But Patrick didn't have to say so because Lenny could feel Patrick's contempt. On the far right was Rhonda, who had a bit of a guilt complex. She felt as though she leaned too much on Billy, the townhouse to her right. Billy didn't think so, but that was because Billy had a tremendous crush on Rhonda, which Rhonda knew but pretended as though she didn't, because she didn't like Billy that way. Jan did like Billy that way, but Billy didn't like Jan that way. Big Yellow was basically in the middle, in between Jan and Patrick. And disputes would arise among Jan and Billy and Jan and Patrick, and really among all the townhouses, but Big Yellow was very adept at settling these disputes. This was a skill that all the other townhouses admired, but all the other townhouses also secretly wished that someone would take Big Yellow down a peg. Big Yellow knew this and pretended to ignore it, but couldn't help but think that the other townhouses were hateful and spiteful, which they kind of were. To recap then, the townhouses were, from left to right, Lenny, Patrick, Big Yellow, Jan, Billy, and Rhonda. And as I say, things would often get heated among them. They all felt cramped and trapped and suffocated. So there was a lot of dissatisfaction and discomfort and unease among the townhouses. They looked like a lovely little, happy little row of townhouses, and they really were quite lovely, but they were not happy. Poem number 570, Persimmons. This is prompted by Stephanie Valenti's April Poetry Prompt number 7, Persimmons. Have I ever eaten a persimmon? Here you come with a basket full of persimmons. Here you are offering a persimmon to me. And this is not a green eggs and ham thing. I have never refused to eat a persimmon. I have never boldly declared that I do not like persimmons without ever having tried one. I am not a Sam I am. It's just that I have never had a persimmon handed to me before, so here I am taking the persimmon from your hand and biting into it. And now I am tasting it. And now I have swallowed my first bite of a persimmon. And now I am thanking you. I am thanking you very much for this persimmon experience. And now I know whether or not I like persimmons. Poem number 571, A House is Not a Home. I often hear voices in my head that give me ideas for poems. The voices can be soft and sweet and full of love and emotional support, or they can be nagging and nitpicky and critical and nasty. For example, regarding yesterday's poems, there was a voice that kept second-guessing whether in poem number 564 I should say building a house together or building a home together. I went with building a house because it matched better with making a film. But the voice kept telling me that home was better because it would have cut deeper. Because then that stanza would have been, and there are false memories of us building a home together, of us cooking together, of us making a film together. The voice told me I was being chicken shit, and I had to agree. But I left it as house all the same. A voice also bothered me about yesterday's poem number 567, but I will tell you about that in poem number 572. Poem number 572, Capitalization of Internet. Hey Johnny, said a voice, how come you capitalized internet in poem number 567 yesterday? Don't you know that the Chicago Manual of Style has recommended that internet be lowercase since 2017? I said, well, according to IBM's TCP/IP Tutorial and Technical Overview, when internet is written with a capital I, it refers to the worldwide set of interconnected networks rather than just any old interconnected network. And the voice said, oh really, Johnny? Tell me, when was IBM's TCP/IP Tutorial and Technical Overview written? Which is what I was afraid the voice was going to ask me. I answered 1989, and the voice said, 1989? 1989? You were still drinking in 1989. Bush was president in 1989, not W. W's father. W's dad was president in 1989. And I said, look, I wanted to refer to the entire internet, and I was kind of personifying it in the poem, so I thought it made sense to capitalize it as if it was a person's name. And the voice said, "Oh, okay, that kind of makes sense." And surprisingly, the voice backed off. Some of the voices know they don't know everything, which is why I sometimes trust them, and why I sometimes don't. And the last poem for the day is poem number 573, Not So Fast. I was happy last night when the judicial election in Wisconsin was called for Janet Protasewicz. Then I learned that if Dan Knodel were to be elected to the Wisconsin State Senate, that Republicans would have a 2/3 majority in that chamber, and that would enable them to remove Janet Protasewicz as judge if they felt like it. And I would imagine they would feel like it. The election was too close to call last night, but this morning it was called for Knodel. In other words, not so fast, Democrats. You were clever enough to pour $40 million into Wisconsin to elect Janet Protasewicz, but you weren't clever enough to spend enough money to defeat Knodel. What should have been a great victory to celebrate is not so great a victory after all. I was just thinking, I don't think they put 40 million. I think 40 million was the total amount spent on the election, so I may have to change that poem. But I'm leaving this reading as is because it was otherwise, I think, acceptable. I appreciate you for listening, if in fact you did. And if in fact you didn't, I still appreciate you secretly. Point is, I appreciate you. Thank you.